We need to act now. The situation is escalating, and we can't afford to wait.
The Korean Mafia boss whispered, "Come here," to the black woman, and her body obeyed before she did. The room was built to intimidate. Black marble floors reflected the chandelier's cold light like still water. Cigarette smoke hung low, clinging to silk curtains and expensive cologne. Men spoke softly here, not out of respect but out of survival. Every sound felt measured, calculated, controlled. Yara Mensa stood near the edge of it all, fingers curled tightly around the slim tablet in her hands. Translator. That was her role. Neutral. Invisible. A bridge between languages, not worlds. She reminded herself of that as she translated numbers, contracts, quiet threats disguised as polite smiles. Do your job. Don't look up. She felt him before she saw him. The air shifted, like the room itself had inhaled. Kang Junhyuk sat at the head of the table, perfectly still. He didn't fidget. Didn't check his watch. Didn't need to assert himself. Power rested on him the way shadows cling to corners, naturally without effort. He hadn't spoken since she arrived. That was worse. Yara kept her gaze trained on the document in front of her, even as awareness crawled up her spine. She knew when people looked at her. She had lived her entire life as a black woman in spaces that weren't built for her comfort. Stares were familiar. This was different. This wasn't curiosity. This was assessment. Like she was being studied, not for beauty, not even for interest, but for reaction. Her chest tightened. The meeting continued. Men laughed softly. Glasses clinked. Someone made a joke that didn't quite land. Then, his voice. "Oh, come." Almost bored. "Kang," someone said, deferential, nervous. "Your thoughts." Silence stretched. Yara lifted her eyes without meaning to. That was her mistake. Junhyuk was already looking at her. Not her face alone, everything. The set of her shoulders. The tension in her jaw. The way she held herself like she was braced for impact even while standing still. His gaze didn't linger where it shouldn't. It didn't roam. It pinned. Her breath caught, sharp and involuntary. He tilted his head slightly as if confirming something to himself. Then he spoke again, but this time it wasn't for the room. It wasn't even loud enough to be polite. "Come here." 2 words. That was all. Her body moved. It happened before thought, before fear, before pride could rise up and stop it. Her foot stepped forward. Then another. The tablet felt suddenly too heavy in her hands, her pulse loud in her ears. Halfway across the floor, realization slammed into her. What am I doing? Her heart began to race. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to turn back, to reclaim control. But something deeper, something older, had already responded. Not to him. To the command. She stopped only when she stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. He smelled faintly of cedar and something sharper beneath it. Steel. Smoke. Control. The room had gone silent. Junhyuk didn't look at her right away. He picked up a glass, took a slow sip, then finally turned his head. Up close, he was even more dangerous, not because of scars or harshness but because of restraint. His face was calm, almost expressionless. His eyes were dark and unreadable like locked doors. "You translate," he said quietly. "Yes," she managed, her voice steady only by sheer will. "Then translate this," he murmured. He leaned in just enough that only she could hear. "Why did you come when I called?" Her throat went dry. She hesitated, then forced honesty. "Because I thought you were addressing me professionally." Pause. His lips curved, not into a smile but something colder. "And if I wasn't?" Her fingers tightened around the tablet. "I would have stopped," she said, even as doubt flickered inside her. He studied her for a long moment, then leaned back, dismissing the question as if it had already been answered. "Continue," he said to the room. Just like that, the meeting resumed. Voices returned. Laughter followed. But Yara stood frozen for a second longer, her skin buzzing where his attention had been. When she finally stepped back, her legs felt unsteady. She hated that. As she returned to her place, she replayed the moment over and over. The way her body had reacted. The way she hadn't felt threatened, but drawn. That scared her more than fear ever could. Across the room, Junhyuk watched her again, not openly this time but through the reflection in his glass. He hadn't needed to raise his voice. Hadn't needed to touch her. And yet, she had come. And now he knew something about her she hadn't wanted anyone to see. That some part of her listened before it questioned. And in his world, that kind of instinct could ruin a woman, or bind her to him forever. Yara did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that room, black marble, low voices, and his whisper slicing through the air like a blade wrapped in velvet. Come here. She lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, listening to the hum of soul outside her window. Car tires hissed against wet asphalt. Somewhere laughter echoed. Life moved on easily, carelessly, while her body remained coiled, tense, as if it was still waiting for something. Or someone. She told herself it was adrenaline, intimidation, culture shock, anything but what it felt like. Because what it felt like was recognition. The next evening, she returned to the same building with her spine straight and her expression locked into calm professionalism. She wore a high-neck blouse this time, long sleeves despite the mild weather. Armor disguised as fabric. She would not be caught off guard again. The guards nodded as she entered. They already knew her face. That alone unsettled her. She had been here only once, yet somehow she felt noticed, catalogued. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Fewer men. Tighter security. The air buzzed with something sharper than before, anticipation, maybe danger. She took her place near the wall, tablet in hand, eyes lowered. Do not look at him. Do not think about him. Minutes passed. Then she felt it again. That same shift in the air. Like gravity had subtly changed direction. You're early, a voice said. Not loud. Not cold. Close. She stiffened before she turned. Jun Hyuk stood a few feet away, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his tailored black suit. No jacket today. The white shirt beneath was open at the collar, revealing a glimpse of skin she absolutely did not want to notice. She inclined her head politely. I prefer to be prepared. Prepared for what? He asked. For my work. His gaze dropped briefly, to her hands, her posture, the way she held herself like she was always bracing for something unseen. He murmured. You don't belong here. The words weren't cruel. They were factual. I know, she said quietly. A pause stretched between them, dense and deliberate. Yet here you are, he replied. He gestured toward the table. Sit. Her muscles tensed. It wasn't the word itself, it was the familiarity of it. The echo of the night before. Her body reacted instantly, heat flickering low in her stomach before she could stop it. She didn't move. I prefer to stand, she said, firm. For the first time, something like amusement touched his eyes. As you wish, he said and turned away. Relief washed through her, quick, disorienting, and followed by something else she hated even more. Disappointment. The meeting began. This one was smaller, more dangerous. She translated discussions about shipments, routes, alliances that sounded too clean to be legal. She kept her voice neutral, her face unreadable. Still, she felt his attention on her like a hand resting just above her skin. Whenever she spoke, he listened. Whenever she paused, he looked up. At one point, she corrected a translation another man attempted to give. Her voice was calm but precise. The room went quiet. A few men turned toward her sharply, displeased. She swallowed but didn't retreat. Jun Hyuk lifted a hand slightly. Continue, he said to her. Not them. Her heart skipped. After the meeting ended, men filed out quickly, heads bowed, voices hushed. No one lingered. She gathered her things, intent on leaving as soon as possible. Yara. Her name, spoken correctly, stopped her cold. She turned slowly. Yes. How long have you lived in Korea? He asked. 2 years. And you still walk like you're apologizing for existing. The comment hit deeper than she expected. I walk like someone who knows when she's unwelcome, she replied. His gaze sharpened, not angry but alert. Unwelcome, he repeated softly. Or unclaimed. Her breath caught. That's not appropriate, she said, though her voice lacked heat. No, he agreed calmly. It's accurate. She should have left then. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to create distance before she forgot who she was. But she stayed. Why do you keep speaking to me like this? She asked. I'm just your translator. Jun Hyuk stepped closer, not invading her space, but close enough that the room seemed to narrow around them. You think I speak like this to everyone? He asked. She shook her head. No, he said. You're different. The words settled heavily between them. Different how? She asked, even as she knew she shouldn't. He studied her for a long moment as if weighing truth against danger. Because you resist, he finally said. But not completely. Her pulse thudded painfully loud. I don't belong in your world, she said again, more insistently this time. His voice lowered. My world doesn't care who belongs. She met his gaze, forcing herself not to flinch. I care. That earned her another pause. Longer this time. Then be careful, he said quietly. Because you're already closer than you realize. She left without another word. Outside, the night air felt too thin. She walked fast, heart racing, mind spinning. She had never been so aware of herself, her body, her breath, the way a single man's voice had the power to undo her balance. She didn't want him. She wanted distance. But as she disappeared into the city, one truth followed her relentlessly. In a room full of powerful men, she had been the one he noticed. And in Junhyuk's world, attention was never accidental. By the third meeting, Yara stopped pretending this was coincidence. Her name appeared on schedules that hadn't included her before. Her arrival times were anticipated. Her presence expected. When she entered the building now, no one asked who she was or why she was there. Doors opened. Men stepped aside. That alone unsettled her. Power, she had learned, did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it moved quietly, through habit, through assumption, through the way people behaved without being told. And Kang Junhyuk was the kind of man whose authority had already decided things before words ever caught up. She told herself she was imagining the pattern. That she was projecting fear onto professionalism. That the tightening in her chest each time she stepped into his world was simply caution. But caution didn't explain why her body reacted before her mind did. It started with distance. Or rather, his control over it. He never touched her. Never brushed past her accidentally. Never cornered her or raised his voice. Instead, he adjusted space the way a chess player adjusted the board. If she stood near the wall, he positioned himself across the room, watching. If she stood farther away, he closed the gap without seeming to move at all. Once, while she translated for a visiting syndicate leader, Junhyuk rose from his seat mid-discussion and walked behind her. His footsteps were silent on the marble floor, but she felt him immediately, like heat before flame. He stopped just behind her shoulder. Not touching. Not speaking. Her breath faltered mid-sentence. The man she was translating for noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Is there a problem?" he asked. Yara swallowed and forced her voice steady. "No." Behind her, Junhyuk leaned slightly closer. Close enough that his presence pressed against her awareness like a hand at her back. "Continue," he murmured. Her knees almost gave out. She hated herself for it. After the meeting, she escaped to the restroom and braced her palms against the cold marble sink. Her reflection stared back at her, eyes too bright, lips parted, skin faintly flushed. Get it together, she told herself. This wasn't attraction. This wasn't desire. This was conditioning. She had spent her life navigating authority, professors, employers, immigration officers, learning when to comply, when to resist. But Junhyuk's authority was different. It didn't demand. It assumed. And some traitorous part of her responded to that assumption like it had been waiting for it. The next time it happened, it was worse. The meeting had ended late. Rain lashed against the windows, turning the city into a blur of lights and shadows. She gathered her things quickly, eager to leave before the weight of his attention settled on her again. "Stay." The word stopped her mid-step. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't even clearly directed at her. But she froze. Her fingers tightened around her tablet. Her heart began to pound so violently she wondered if anyone could hear it. "Stay." She told herself she could keep walking. That she was not obligated. That she was an employee, not a possession. Her body didn't listen. She turned back slowly. Junhyuk was still seated at the head of the table, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked with faint, elegant tattoos disappearing beneath his cuffs. He didn't look at her right away. When he finally did, his gaze flicked briefly to her feet, as if checking whether she'd obeyed. "You can go," he said calmly. The words hit her like a slap. "I thought you said—" She stopped herself, anger flaring hot and sharp. "Why did you tell me to stay?" "Because I wanted to see if you would," he replied simply. Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." She took a step closer, fury overriding fear. "You don't get to test me." Junhyuk leaned back in his chair, unbothered. "Everyone is tested." "I didn't consent to this," she said. His eyes darkened, not with lust but with interest. "And yet," he said softly, "you responded." The silence stretched, thick and charged. "I'm not weak," she said, voice trembling despite her effort. "I know," he replied. "Weak people don't resist at all." That frightened her more than if he had insulted her. She left without another word, her mind buzzing, her body aching with a tension she didn't know how to release. That night, she dreamed of his voice. Not shouting. Not demanding. Just low and close, curling around her spine like smoke. She woke with her heart racing, sheets twisted around her legs, shame burning her cheeks. Days passed. Then another meeting. Then another. Each time the same invisible thread pulled tight between them. Sometimes he ignored her entirely, and those days were the worst. She found herself hyper-aware of his absence, of the silence where his attention should have been. Other times he spoke to her without looking at her at all. "Stand there," he said once, pointing casually to a spot beside him. She obeyed before thinking. The realization hit her seconds later, nauseating and electric. She stayed where she was, refusing to move again until the meeting ended. Her muscles burned with the effort of restraint. When it was over, she turned to leave. "Yara," he said. She stopped, eyes closing briefly as if bracing herself. "You didn't have to stay so rigid," he continued calmly. "I wasn't going to touch you." Her cheeks flamed. "I wasn't afraid of that," she lied. He stood then, towering over her without stepping closer. "No," he said quietly. "You were afraid you'd want me to." The words landed with devastating precision. She couldn't speak. He didn't wait for her to. "Go home," he said, voice neutral again. "Get some rest." She walked out on shaking legs, anger and longing twisting together until she couldn't tell them apart. She told herself she would quit. That she would request reassignment. That no job was worth this erosion of control. But deep down she knew the truth she refused to name. She wasn't just responding to him. She was responding to the part of herself that came alive under his gaze. And that was the most dangerous obedience of all. The kind no one ordered. The kind she gave without permission. The truth did not arrive all at once. It seeped in slowly, through overheard conversations that stopped when she entered a room, through the way men stiffened when Junhyuk's name was mentioned, through the subtle shifts in loyalty and fear that no translation could soften. Yara began to notice patterns. Meetings scheduled at odd hours. Guests who arrived smiling and left pale. Contracts that never reached paper. Words like logistics and security used as veils for something far heavier beneath. And always, Junhyuk at the center. Calm. Controlled. Untouched by chaos. She told herself it wasn't her business. She told herself she was just a translator. But denial became impossible the night she followed the sound of raised voices down a corridor she was not supposed to enter. She had been looking for the restroom. Instead she found blood. Not pools of it, nothing so dramatic. Just streaks on marble hastily wiped. A broken glass discarded in a corner. The sharp, metallic scent hanging faintly in the air. Her stomach turned. She stepped back instinctively, and collided with a solid chest. Strong hands caught her shoulders before she could fall. "Careful," a familiar voice said quietly. She looked up. Junhyuk. Up close, she saw it then. The faint darkening at his knuckles, the subtle tension in his jaw, the stillness of a man who had already passed through violence and left it behind. Her breath hitched. "What was that?" she asked, her voice barely steady. His gaze flicked down the corridor, then back to her. "You shouldn't be here," he said. That wasn't an answer. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." She stepped out of his hold, heart hammering. "What is this place?" He studied her for a long moment, eyes searching. Not her face but her resolve. "You already know," he said. The words landed heavy. "I need to hear it," she insisted. A silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Finally he spoke. "This is my territory," he said calmly. "And everything in it answers to me." Her chest tightened. "You're Mafia." He didn't correct her. Didn't deny it. "Yes," he said simply. The confirmation felt like a blow. She took a step back, every instinct screaming danger. "You lied to me," she said. "No," he replied. "I omitted." "That's not better." He nodded slightly. "I know." She laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "I walked into a criminal empire thinking I was translating contracts." "You were," he said. "Just not legal ones." Her hands trembled. She clenched them into fists. "Why keep me here? Why not tell me the truth?" "Because you wouldn't have come," he said. "And now? Now you've already seen me." The weight of his words settled deep. She shook her head. "I can't do this. I won't be part of whatever this is." She turned to leave. His voice stopped her. "You can walk away," he said quietly. She paused. "If you leave tonight," he continued, "you will never be contacted again. No pressure. No consequences." Slowly she turned back to him. His face was unreadable. "You're serious," she said. "Yes." The ease with which he offered her freedom unsettled her more than if he had threatened her. Then why does it feel like a trap? She asked. Because choice always does, he replied. She searched his face, trying to find manipulation, deceit, coercion. Instead, she found restraint. You could force me to stay, she said. Yes. You could silence me. Yes. But you won't. No, he said. Because if you remain, I want it to be because you chose to. Her pulse thundered. And if I stay, she whispered, what then? His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. Then you accept what I am, he said. And you accept that I will not pretend to be harmless. Fear and something dangerously close to longing twisted inside her. I don't belong here, she said again, but the words sounded weaker now. Junhyuk stepped closer, not crowding her but close enough that she felt the heat of him, the gravity. Belonging, he said softly, isn't about safety. She swallowed. It's about recognition. Her breath shuddered. She thought of how her body responded to his voice. How she listened even when she didn't want to. How some part of her felt seen in his silence. That frightened her more than guns or blood ever could. I need time, she said. He nodded. Take it. You won't follow me? She asked. No. You won't call? No. She searched his face once more. And if I don't come back? Something dark flickered in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. Then I will let you go, he said. She left with her heart in pieces and her mind in chaos. Outside, the city felt too loud, too bright. Her steps faltered as the truth replayed again and again. Kang Junhyuk was dangerous, powerful, capable of violence without hesitation. And yet, he had given her something no one else ever had. A real choice. That night, she stood in front of her mirror for a long time, staring at herself like she was a stranger. Because the most terrifying truth wasn't who he was. It was the realization that knowing exactly what he was had not made her want him any less. Time did not give Yara clarity. It only sharpened everything she tried to dull. 3 days passed after she learned the truth. 3 days in which she did not return to the building of black marble and quiet violence. 3 days in which she tried to convince herself that distance was the same thing as escape. She went to work. She translated documents for people whose lives felt suddenly small and safe. She smiled at co-workers who had no idea how close she had stood to power sharp enough to cut skin without touching it. But her body did not forget. Every sound seemed too loud. Every silence too heavy. She found herself pausing at crosswalks, heart racing for no reason, as if expecting a low voice behind her to say her name. Yar. At night, she lay awake replaying his words. You can walk away. He hadn't chased her. Hadn't summoned her. Hadn't tested her. That restraint disturbed her more than possession ever could have. On the 4th evening, her phone vibrated. A known number. Her pulse spiked instantly. The message was short. If you choose to return, come tonight. If not, this will be the last message you receive. No signature. He didn't need one. She stared at the screen for a long time, fingers cold, chest tight. This was it, the moment she had asked for without realizing it. A clean line. In or out. She told herself she was angry. Angry that he had planted himself in her thoughts so deeply. Angry that she felt pulled instead of repelled by what he was. But anger didn't explain why she changed clothes. Didn't explain why she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her coat, her hair, as if appearance mattered in a place ruled by blood. She arrived just after midnight. The guards let her in without question. Her heart pounded as she stepped inside, every sense alert, every instinct screaming that she was crossing a line she wouldn't be able to erase. The building was quieter than usual. No meetings. No crowds. Just soft lighting and silence that pressed against her ears. He was waiting. Not at the head of a table. Not behind a desk. In the open space near the windows, city lights glowing behind him like a crown of fire. He turned when he heard her footsteps. No surprise crossed his face. You came, he said. Yes, she replied. But don't misunderstand why. I won't, he said calmly. Tell me. She swallowed. I came because I need to understand what this is. His gaze sharpened slightly. And what do you think it is? A mistake, she said honestly. A dangerous one. He nodded. Danger doesn't make something false. She laughed bitterly. No. It just makes it costly. They stood several feet apart, the space between them thick with everything they hadn't said. For the first time since they met, she noticed how tired he looked. Not weak, not worn down, but burdened. Like a man who never rested, even when standing still. I won't touch you, he said suddenly. Not tonight. Not ever, unless you ask. The words landed hard. She hadn't realized how tightly wound she was until her shoulders loosened slightly. And if I never ask, she said. Then I'll live with that, he replied. She searched his face. Why are you doing this? Because I want you, he said plainly. The honesty stole her breath. But wanting isn't the same as taking, he continued. And I don't want obedience from you. I already know I can get that. Her pulse quickened. I want to know, he said quietly, if you would choose me even when you understand the cost. Silence stretched between them, fragile and electric. You're dangerous, she whispered. Yes. You could ruin me. Yes. You could make me disappear. Yes. Her voice shook. Then why do I feel safer when you're honest with me than when anyone else lies? Something dark and almost reverent passed through his eyes. Because I don't pretend to be good, he said. I just pretend to be controlled. She took a step closer before she realized she was moving. Then another. He didn't move at all. Didn't reach for her. Didn't close the distance. That was what finally broke her composure. You look at me like you already own me, she said, voice tight. I look at you like I'm afraid I might, he replied. The confession hit her harder than any threat. She stopped an arm's length away, close enough to feel the heat of him, the pull of something that made her blood feel too warm beneath her skin. This can't end well, she said. No, he agreed. But it will be real. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. She wanted him. The want was no longer subtle. It lived in her muscles, in the ache behind her ribs, in the way her body leaned toward his without permission. And that scared her more than guns or secrets or blood on marble floors. I won't be controlled, she said fiercely. I wouldn't survive you if you were, he replied. Their gazes locked, something unspoken passing between them, an understanding that whatever this was, it would not be gentle and it would not be simple. But it would be chosen. Slowly, deliberately, she closed the last inch between them, not touching, just standing close enough that her breath brushed his chest. This want, she whispered, is dangerous. Yes, he said, voice rough for the first time. She met his eyes. Then don't mistake it for weakness. His lips curved into a faint, lethal smile. I never would. And in that moment, Yara understood the truth she could no longer deny. She wasn't standing at the edge of danger anymore. She was standing inside it, aware, unafraid, and wanting him anyway. The first sign of trouble came as silence. Not the calm, deliberate quiet that usually wrapped Junhyuk's world like armor, but a fractured, uneasy stillness that made the air feel wrong. Phones stopped ringing. Men moved faster, spoke less. The building seemed to hold its breath. Yara felt it the moment she stepped inside. Her body had learned his world now, the way danger announced itself before words ever did. Something's happening, she said softly to the guard who escorted her in. He didn't answer. His jaw was tight, eyes alert. That was answer enough. She found Junhyuk in the operations room, surrounded by screens glowing with city maps and shifting data. Several men stood around him, voices low and tense. No one sat. He stood at the center, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, tattoos fully visible now, dark lines tracing strength and restraint beneath his skin. He didn't look at her when she entered. Lock down the east route, he said calmly. Pull our people from the docks. Now. One of the men hesitated. Boss, if we retreat. We live, Junhyuk cut in, voice still even. Move. They scattered. Only then did he turn to her. Why are you here? He asked quietly. You didn't tell me not to come, she replied. A muscle in his jaw tightened. This isn't a night for you. Then send me away, she said. Say it. He allowed a pause to stretch between them, long enough that she felt the weight of it press against her chest. I can't, he said finally. That frightened her. What's happening? She asked. A challenge, he replied. From people who want to see how much blood it takes to make me blink. Her stomach twisted. Will there be fighting? Yes. Here? Not if I do my job. She took a breath, steadying herself. Then I'll stay out of your way. His eyes darkened. That's not what I meant. Before she could ask what he did mean, shouting erupted down the corridor. Footsteps thundered closer. A man burst into the room, face pale. They breached the outer gate. Junhyuk was already moving. He turned to Yara, hands gripping her shoulders with sudden intensity, not rough but desperate in a way she hadn't seen before. Listen to me, he said. Go to the safe room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Her heart slammed against her ribs. What if you don't come back? His gaze flickered just once. "I will," he said. She nodded, trusting him with a faith that startled them both. The safe room was cold and windowless, designed to protect secrets, not comfort people. She sat on the edge of a metal bench, hands clasped tightly in her lap, listening. Sounds filtered through the walls, raised voices, hurried commands, the distant echo of impact. She tried not to imagine blood. Tried not to imagine him hurt. Minutes stretched into hours. Her fear shifted, sharpened, became something else entirely. When the door finally opened, she jumped to her feet. Junhyuk stood in the doorway. His suit was ruined. Blood, not all of it his, darkened the fabric at his shoulder and knuckles. His expression was carved from stone, eyes burning with something feral and barely contained. The door closed behind him. "You're hurt," she said immediately. "It's nothing," he replied. She crossed the room before he could stop her. "Sit down." He hesitated, then obeyed. The irony didn't escape either of them. She examined the cut on his shoulder, shallow but angry. Her hands were steady, even as her heart raced. "You could have sent someone else," she said quietly. "I didn't want anyone else touching me," he replied. The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. As she cleaned the wound, she felt the tension vibrating beneath his skin. He was holding himself back. She could feel it in the way his muscles stayed coiled, in the way his breathing remained carefully controlled. "You're shaking," she murmured. He laughed softly, without humor. "No. I'm restraining myself." Her hands paused. "From what?" "From everything I'm not allowed to be," he said. She met his eyes. In them she saw it, the violence, the hunger, the rage he kept leashed so tightly it threatened to tear him apart from the inside. "You don't scare me," she said. He exhaled sharply. "You should." "But I don't," she insisted. "I see you." That was the moment something inside him cracked. He stood abruptly, pacing away from her like a predator caged in his own skin. "If you stay near me like this," he said, voice rough, "there will come a night I won't be able to stop myself." She followed him, undeterred. "Stop yourself from what?" "From taking control," he snapped. "From commanding instead of asking. From making you obey just to prove I can." Her pulse thundered, but she didn't step back. Instead she whispered, "Then don't command." He turned sharply. "Tell me to leave," he said. "Now." She looked at him, this powerful, dangerous man standing on the edge of himself, and made a choice. "No," she said softly. "Stay." The word landed like permission and curse combined. He froze. "Yara," he warned. "I'm not afraid of you losing control," she said. "I'm afraid of you thinking you're unworthy of being chosen." Something raw crossed his face. Slowly, deliberately he stopped moving. "I am choosing you," she said, voice steady. "Even now." His breathing grew uneven. "That choice," he said hoarsely, "is the only thing keeping me human tonight." They stood inches apart, not touching, the space between them electric with everything they were holding back. Outside the room, his world burned and bled and shifted. Inside it, for the first time, Kang Junhyuk allowed himself to feel something far more dangerous than violence. He allowed himself to care. And he knew, terrifyingly, irrevocably, that if anyone ever tried to take her from him, he would not restrain himself again. After that night, nothing returned to what it had been. The city still pulsed beneath Junhyuk's empire. Deals were made. Blood was quietly cleaned from marble floors. Men still bowed their heads when he passed. But something in him had shifted. And Yara felt it immediately. He no longer tested her. No whispered commands. No deliberate manipulation of space. No moments designed to see whether her body would move before her will. Instead there was distance. Not coldness, never that, but consideration. He began asking instead of telling. "Will you stay? Is this all right? Do you want to leave?" Each question landed heavier than any command ever had. Because questions meant vulnerability. For Yara it was disorienting. She had built defenses against control, against coercion, against the seductive danger of his authority. She had not prepared for a man like Kang Junhyuk choosing restraint when power was second nature to him. The first time she noticed it clearly was during a meeting. She stood at his side, translating as usual, but this time when the conversation grew heated and voices rose, he glanced at her, not to anchor himself, not to assert dominance, but to check her expression. "Are you all right?" The silent question unsettled her more than his commands ever had. Afterward, when the room cleared, she turned to him. "You don't need to watch me like that," she said. "I do," he replied calmly. "Because if this ever becomes too much for you, I want to know before it breaks you." The word broke echoed uncomfortably in her chest. You think I'm fragile, she said. No, he said. I think you matter. That was worse. Days passed, then weeks. Their connection deepened in quiet ways, shared meals eaten in silence, late-night conversations where he spoke of strategy and consequence instead of violence, moments where she learned the weight he carried alone. He never glorified his world. Never justified it. This is what I am, he told her one night, standing at the window, city lights reflecting in his eyes. Not what I wanted to be. What did you want? She asked. He didn't answer right away. Free, he said eventually. The word struck her deeply. You're the most powerful man I know, she said. And yet, he replied, turning to her, I cannot walk away without burning everything behind me. She understood then that his power was also his cage. That realization softened something in her chest she hadn't realized was clenched. One evening, after a particularly long day, she found him in the penthouse library, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. He sat with his elbows resting on his knees, gaze distant. You're exhausted, she said. I'm always exhausted, he replied. She hesitated, then moved closer, sitting beside him, not touching, just sharing space. You don't have to carry everything alone, she said quietly. He laughed softly. That's the job. Then let me carry some of it, she said. He turned to her slowly. This, he said, gesturing between them, is the most dangerous thing in my life. Because I could be used against you? She asked. Yes. And because you care, she added. He nodded once. I have enemies who would destroy cities to see me bleed, he said. And then there's you, who could undo me just by walking away. Her throat tightened. That's not power, she said. That's trust. He studied her as if the concept were foreign. That night, when he finally touched her, it was nothing like the hunger she had imagined. No urgency. No claiming. Just his hand resting lightly against her back, warm and steady, as if asking permission with every breath. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned in. The contact was quiet, but devastating. He closed his eyes, forehead resting against hers, breath uneven. If I cross a line, he murmured, tell me. I will, she whispered. He didn't kiss her then. He pulled away. And somehow that restraint made her chest ache more than anything else. Later, when she lay awake alone, she realized the truth. He was loving her in the only language he trusted. Through protection, through control of himself, through power deliberately withheld. And she was answering him not with obedience, but with presence. In a world that obeyed him without question. She was the one who stayed because she wanted to. And that choice bound them more tightly than any command ever could. Because love in Kang Joon-hyuk's world was not spoken, was proven. Every time he chose not to take what was already his to command. The words returned to them slowly. Not as a command. Not as a test. But as a memory that had changed shape. Months passed and Seoul moved through seasons the way empires move through power, quietly, inevitably. Joon-hyuk's world remained dangerous, his position unchanged, his enemies patient. Violence still existed at the edges of his life, but it no longer bled into the space he shared with Yara. Because that space had rules now. Unspoken, deliberate rules built on choice. She no longer flinched at the sound of his footsteps behind her. No longer braced herself when his voice dropped low. The tension between them didn't vanish, but it transformed, sharpening into something steadier, deeper. Trust. And trust, she learned, was far more intimate than desire. One night, after a gathering that left his men tense and his patience thin, Yara waited for him in the penthouse. The city stretched below them, a field of lights glittering like promises that had already been broken. He stood at the window, shoulders tight, jaw set. She recognized the signs now, the weight he carried when decisions had been made that would echo for weeks, maybe years. You're still here, he said without turning. I said I would be, she replied. He nodded once. Silence settled between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. She watched him, this man who commanded loyalty with a glance, who could ruin lives with a word, and saw the exhaustion beneath the silk and steel. You're holding something back, she said gently. He exhaled slowly. I always am. She stepped closer. Not invading. Just present. You don't have to with me, she said. He turned then, fully facing her. His eyes searched her face, not for permission, not for weakness, but for truth. There are nights, he said quietly, when the world only makes sense if I'm in control of it. And tonight, she asked. Tonight, he said, I want to know if I can let go. Her heart beat faster, but she didn't step back. You already have, she said. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head faintly. No. I've only learned to ask. The city hummed below them. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded. Life went on. He took a single step toward her, slow, deliberate. Come here, he said softly. Her body responded. But this time it wasn't instinct. It wasn't conditioning. It wasn't obedience. She moved because she wanted to. The difference was profound. She closed the distance and rested her hands lightly against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath expensive fabric and guarded skin. He didn't touch her right away. Instead he waited. For the first time, he said, voice low, almost unsteady, those words don't feel like power. She looked up at him. They feel like an invitation. Yes. She nodded. Then I accept. His hands came to her back, gentle, reverent, as if she were something sacred in a world that destroyed sacred things without hesitation. He rested his forehead against hers, breathing her in. I won't command you, he murmured. I know, she replied. And if you ever leave, I'll leave because I choose to, she finished. Not because you pushed me away. That truth settled between them like a vow. When he finally kissed her, it wasn't hunger that led. It was restraint dissolving into trust. The kiss was slow, careful, full of everything they had survived to reach this moment. No urgency. No claiming. Just connection. Later, as dawn hinted at the horizon, they stood together at the window. His arm rested around her, not possessive, not protective, simply there. You changed me, he said quietly. She smiled faintly. You let yourself be changed. He considered that, then nodded. In my world, he said, everything obeys. She turned to face him. And in mine, she said, nothing that matters ever should. He looked at her then, not as a boss, not as a ruler, but as a man who had found something he would protect not with force but with choice. The whisper that once ruled her body had lost its power. Because now, her heart answered first.